Hi, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. We are CMHA's podcast, Keep Connected. This podcast really is about our connections. Please listen in each week or every other week when we are recording. And our Keep Connected podcast really has to do with stories about an individual with lived experience, peers, support, our community, arts, research, and much, much more. The whole hope of our Keep Connected podcast is really to bring, listeners a lot of inspiring ways that we can help others and we can start to build that suicide safer community here in Windsor-Essex County. So this is the last week of May, and I thought it was really Ewelina and I thought it was really important that we speak about loss and grief and offer any listeners, some tips. I had the wonderful pleasure this week of hosting a webinar with Sonia McMahon-Comartin, and she is our grief educator. So thank you so much, Sonia, for I think you had no choice. You had to be on this podcast.
I agreed to do it. You're welcome.
Thank you. Ewelina, how are you?
I'm doing well. I'm excited to be a part of this podcast today. I think people are going through a lot of changes and it's a lot of grief, whether it's, job loss or whether they're experiencing changes and they're adapting to a lot of different things. So, but I'm doing well. All is good. If family's good, I'm good. Thanks for asking, Jenny. How are you doing?
Currently very, very hot. But guess what? I'm in the office, which now it's almost like a treat that I get to come in the office when I have things to do in terms of, just getting resources ready. So my makeshift background, very cool, sporting the CMHA logo. So, it's like I mentioned last podcast, day by day, and it's okay to not expect that stability. So thank you again, Sonia, and let's jump right into it. So for our webinar that we co-facilitated, it really was about understanding loss and grief during COVID-19. And I know that I loved you were able to provide so much information, ideas, tips, and strategies for listeners that have experienced loss in losing a loved one due to COVID-19. And could you just really talk? I know there's a lot of listeners. You better be a lot of listeners. No, just kidding. So let's differentiate between grief and mourning.
Okay, yes, that's an important one because we often do think of those words to mean the same thing, right? But actually, grief is our internal feelings, how we feel when we lose something or someone, so how we feel inside. So that's a natural occurrence. What isn't so natural is to do the work of mourning. Mourning means outward expression. You might phrase it and think about it as grief gone public. So, in other words, talking about our loss, crying, expressing frustration and anger. That's the piece we struggle with more because we place those shoulds on ourselves that we shouldn't feel that way, or perhaps we're embarrassed to talk about it and truly express ourselves. But to grieve well, we do need to mourn.
And thank you, Sonia. What I've noticed a lot, this is now, 10 weeks, week 10, that our routines have kind of thus flipped upside down. And, at first, I remember in the beginning, the initial, I was hearing, a lot of individuals coping with loss, financially, job loss, loss of major events, monumentous occasions. I think about our high school, our youth, missing out on, their graduation, convocation, all of these things. And I heard someone, the other day just say, yeah, I'm not able to go to my convocation or my prom, but, whatever. And I was like, no, it's not whatever. Have you, you know, have you cried it out? Have you like honestly sat with it? And they're like, well, no. Why would I do that? Like there's so, you know, there are other individuals that have lost individuals. Who am I to just cry over not being able to go to prom? Can you really just talk to the viewers about it's okay to experience like that grief in regards to just those losses?
Yes, for sure, Jenny, because we all are experiencing something different, something that we've not, been in this place before. And with that, as you mentioned, comes, so many events that are either altered, postponed, or canceled. I'm really glad to hear that some things are being postponed. I'm starting to hear that about graduations and proms. I mean, of course, some people it's about their wedding or, funerals as well. But to answer that question, yes, we're all where we're at with what we're experiencing. And I think for us to be in that place and not minimize what it is, because it's life, it's important, it's something we had scheduled. So, when there's something that is taken away and we don't have that control to make it different, we do feel maybe that emptiness inside, that those feelings of sadness and just desire of, oh, I so wish, that could have happened or could happen as we intended. So
Oh,
yes,
thank
to not go to that place of someone's loss is larger, right? There's always different losses, but we're very individual in how we handle things, and to give ourselves the gift and the grace of being with that emotion is the best thing we can do.
And I was also thinking, Sonia, about individuals who may be working with people affected by COVID, whether those are frontline workers in the healthcare industry or PSWs or even social workers, and how, sometimes people have the ability to kind of maybe go through that grief and mourn in some ways. But right now, if they're still continuously going to work and exposing themselves to maybe situations that might cause grief, um, I imagine that that's going to be difficult to process, right? Like if it's a continual thing. So I'm just thinking about all the frontline workers that might be experiencing, but don't really have an opportunity to necessarily process that. And then like how that's going to affect them in the future, right? So once this is all over, when we look back, I mean, even looking back at the fact that the borders are closed, we're going to look back next year probably be like, wow, that actually happened, So, do you think like people experience that, like maybe looking back of like the weight of it, and also like we're going through and we're kind of pushing through, and maybe we're like, okay, well, that's no big deal, but maybe later we're going to look back at things and be like, wow, I can't believe that happened, and maybe that might start affecting us later.
Yes, yes. And I think for each of us to acknowledge the impacts that it has, you're talking about frontline workers to, be able to communicate with one another, express those feelings. I mentioned on the webinar the other day that I heard saying recently, that talking, if we allow it, can be our power drink. And that really spoke to me because we talk about communicating, but let's do that. And, just like some people use energy drinks to keep on going, let's have the communication, as a really great friend to, be present there with us. And whatever emotion that brings up, that is suitable, right? Let's be with that. We need to remember that there are no negative emotions. They just are what they are. Because this is big. This is different. The word unprecedented is really key. And that's truly what it is right now. So we're all adapting.
Oh, thank you, Sonia. You know, a big thing that, and I'm going to speak personally. I know that I think it was like week 4, and Ewelina, same thing. We were kind of in the same boat. We both had vacations. Oh, Sonia did too. All 3 of us. And obviously, travel was canceled. First, Ewelina didn't go. Then it was me. Then it was Sonia. Long story short, I remember not really like being upset. I just kept shoving the emotion down. Like I don't want to think about my vacation being canceled, doing the opposite of what we're just speaking about, holding the emotion, being angry, being frustrated, stomping my feet and saying it's not fair. But I did do it the day that I was supposed to fly, and it helped.
Yes,
Any
so
of you do
firsthand
that?
example. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Did any of you experience that in terms of any types of, loss of our routine, working remotely?
Uh, I'll just maybe go first. Yeah, with the because it just started happening because it was around I was supposed to go mid March or end of March. So it was one of those like, wow, this is something I actually have to do. I was talking to my family members, and they're like, you can't go, and I'm like, but things were still open. So it was a lot of like every day with new information, and then to make that decision. But the way I look at it too, it's like it's not just for me; it's for other people too, right? I'm considering how if I ever got sick with COVID, like I would probably be okay. But I'm thinking about my parents. I'm thinking about the people I'm around, and how that might affect them emotionally and also physically, right? So I kind of just try to weigh and balance those things out as much as possible. Yeah, but certainly I definitely looking forward to it. It was something a place I'd never gone to, and I love to travel. And but I'm just the thing is that makes me feel better about it is that we're all in this together. We've all had that shared experience. So I'm like the only person going through this, you know?
Mhm. Yes, and I would say something similar. We were counting on that vacation this year, kind of laughed because we've, traveled in the winter, but we chose March break. So just at that time when we were, preparing that we were going to leave, one day we were going, and then as things
The
changed
next
so
day.
quickly, the next day I was on the phone, by 9 o'clock in the morning canceling because we just knew, as Evelina said, not only for ourselves, but for other people, it's the right thing to do. I think the piece for us and so many I hope is that we're feeling it's not that that trip won't happen, it's just delayed, or that's our thinking and the plan. But I did kind of laugh, and I guess my way to express it, because I had said to a couple colleagues we were going to travel last year and the year before we didn't. It's been about 3 years since we've gone on a trip in the winter. And so one day I remember saying to them, yep, it's booked this year, we're going no matter what. So that no matter what turned into, okay, this is something, of course, that I hadn't thought of. Who could foresee? So, nope, obviously not happening. And both the people that I said it to, like the three of us, their vacations needed to be canceled as well.
So let's get back to, you did mention a lot of things have been postponed, a lot of things canceled, a lot of new ways that we are trying, to be able to mourn. And one of those things really is, like you mentioned, a funeral service. And I was telling Sonia right before our webinar, I participated in a memorial service for my great aunt that had passed away, and it was nice to be able to have something virtually. And it wasn't the ideal, but I still felt like I was able to mourn and pay my respect and tribute to my great aunt. Sonia, you spoke so much in regards to some different creative ways. Could you, just quickly go over some of those?
For sure. I think it is about finding what's meaningful to us and our families in a time when we don't have that choice to do what would be more traditional. There are grief rituals that we can, do, we can adapt in order to, still express these feelings. So whether it is, a visitation with limited people, or some people are having virtual funerals, as you mentioned, and finding that is, again, something. I've also found it really helpful and meaningful when I've seen people express themselves, and this is locally, as well as I've been following quite a bit what they've been doing in Nova Scotia with, different types of memorials and representations, whether that's writing or playing certain songs, being creative with stones, even as people paint, or other representations of knitting, sewing. There's a multitude of ideas. And I also want to mention someone locally that died. The family member actually put an old tractor, and I believe there were 10 candles, on and around it, and there were 10 children. There are 10 children in the family. They put that out front at one of their homes, and that just really struck me as a beautiful representation of life and love and, the legacy that continues. And it was their way to express themselves. We're also recommending that with so many funerals and memorial celebration of life being postponed, that the consideration of thinking about and planning what you're going to have in whatever time frame that might be, that starts now, because that is very helpful to think about what families want to do as well as step into their grief.
Thank you, Sonia. I found it hard. My grandmother was that was her aunt, so it was really hard. I found it challenging in so many ways of how could I be there as a family member to support my grandmother, but with, physical distancing, and she is elderly, so I got to make sure. I sent flowers, I called, I FaceTimed, and you still just feel like, what else can I do? All I want to do is hug my grandma. What are
Mhm.
some other ways? Because I know that's a question I get asked all the time, is like, what can I do for someone who has lost someone? Because we know human beings, we thrive on, being there for one another, and right now it's difficult.
Yes, most certainly, Jenny. And, that question, I think, again, it's doing what we're able. It might be messaging someone, really quite often, perhaps on a daily basis, even if there aren't a lot of words, but sending them a virtual hug, offering to bring food if they're comfortable with that and drop that off, writing something. It might be using technology, or we could even go back to the old way of, sending a letter in the mail. Also, bringing activities for children, if there are kids that are part of the picture as well, that's helpful. It's also asking what people can use and would benefit from. I think we shy away from that, and there's a tendency even to look at people differently once they've lost and have that discomfort. But to say, I'm just wanting to do something for you. Is there anything in particular that would be helpful right now? To not be afraid to ask that question, because there might be something that's very meaningful. Um, maybe it's picking up groceries for them, for example. You may not have thought of that.
Yeah, I think I love, really learning from you and, the grief and the bereavement therapists as well, because, in our society, we're not comfortable with speaking about death.
Mhm.
We do shy away. We get discomforted because, for me personally, and this, I remember, I'm better now because I always ask for guidance from, all of my colleagues. But I remember there was a time when I would, just think to myself, what do I say? Can I say the individual's name? And the biggest thing people, I think you and Carolyn told me was, that's one of the things someone misses, is when you don't say that person's loved one's name. Um, Ewelina, what do you think?
Yeah, certainly, because it's like we're I feel like in situations when I've lost a loved one, since we're on this topic, it's like I worry to bring up something that would be emotionally maybe uncomfortable more for me than the other person, or to trigger them somehow, or to make them feel like upset. But then I realized too that maybe they need that space. Maybe they need, maybe no one's talking about them. It's like, are we ignoring this? But then they don't want to bring it up and make the other person uncomfortable. So maybe just like talking to them about it, and maybe focusing on maybe some happier memories or some, you know. But yeah, it's uncomfortable. Like no one really
Yeah.
wants to see anyone suffer, so it's hard.
Yes, and that is huge. And I'm so glad that you brought this up, because that is right on, that to speak our loved ones' names is key, and to keep their memory alive, not to shove the feelings down and pretend that they didn't exist, right? Of course, they're sad. That sadness will be there. And whether or not we speak the person's name, it's there. Yes, when we talk about that person, that emotion may surface. But what we're actually doing is giving them that gift, that opportunity to mourn. So while we tend to want to fix things, and we generationally have been a death denying society, I think we're getting better at that, but we still have work to do. It's about recognizing it's not fixing. It's not about needing to make someone feel better. It's being present with them. And I often mention, as a way to summarize this, an early mentor, I'll always remember her saying, it's about being there, being sensitive, and being silent. So we don't have to say a lot of words. It's our presence and taking our loved one's lead. And if we're not sure, being okay to check in and ask, and if they're starting to feel tired and not wanting to share anymore, um, promising that, we'll pick this up another day, and keeping that commitment, right? Not ending that conversation, being with our loved ones, because the best thing we can do is offer that support.
Thank you. I also, and I think it was either you or, or someone else from the bereavement team, but I also remember, really you highlighting, don't call and say, what can I do? Because we generally are going to say, no, I'm good, I'm good. And
Mhm.
it would be better if you are concerned, or you're thinking about, how can I help this person that has just, lost someone. It's not even asking, what can I do, and just doing it. So if
Mhm.
the lawn looks like it's a little bit high, go cut the lawn, or bring them a sandwich, a salad, anything.
Yes. Yes. Not asking so much, can I bring you dinner or can I bring you lunch? It's, I'd like to bring you lunch on Tuesday evening. Is that a good day for you? That type of thing. So, yes, be very specific. And if something happens, they do resist, or there isn't, maybe that need, let them know that, I do want to do something and I am planning on it. So if there is something that is more suitable, that's fine. But have that conversation again, and let them know that they're not putting you out. I think we tend to decline when we're the ones that are bereaved, the support, but to let them know, I really want to do this. This is meaningful. And a lot of times it is helpful for the person reaching out to express their own grief, because they're either feeling for the person who's lost, or perhaps they also knew the person who died as well. So it's truly meaningful and, beneficial in their grief journey as well. The word bereaved means to be torn apart, to have special needs. So yes, looking at it that way, there is so much that we can offer, and for each of us to just reach out and show that support.
And I think that's why Ewelina and I really wanted to focus on keeping connected through, any type of way that is meaningful to you, to increase that feeling of, mental wellness, and feeling connected, a sense of belonging and supported in our community as well. Because, we're not comfortable experiencing losses, but the biggest thing we spoke about, you and I, was really making sure that people embrace their feelings, sitting with those emotions, and not labeling them, right? Really holding them. And Sonia, you mentioned to the participants, like, grief is not in stages. It's not going to stop when you reach here. Can you talk about that? Because I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there.
For sure. And grief is part of our life journey, and it does change us, right? It makes life different. It doesn't go away. I think of that for myself, for example, with my dad, who died over 2 years ago, right? But we change and evolve. And as we go through that journey, we recognize, our ability to cope and what's helpful for us. But I think to be patient with ourselves and know that those feelings don't go away. And at times, something someone says, a song we hear, pictures we see, movies we watch, whatever it is, can trigger that. But that's very healthy and helpful, because we treasure that person. We treasured them when they were alive, and even though they're not physically present, we continue to treasure them. So I think it would be odd if we didn't have some of that emotion surface and need to express it.
Thank you. Well, I think I'm out of questions. I could go on, of course. Ewelina, any last remarks any questions? We have Sonia on the spot.
Sonia, though, thank you. I'm just glad, like, right now that I'm going to take away is the fact that, yes, even though culturally we don't really talk about death, it's kind of on the sidelines. With COVID, everything's been a bit more exposed. We're talking about, how many people died or recovered or how many cases. We're seeing things in the news. So it's a lot more in our face, and that, I feel like, might trigger like maybe past losses or worries and stuff like that. And that's where we talk about anxiety and moods and like what we've gone through. So just being really patient, like you said, Sonia, with ourselves, practicing self-compassion and compassion for others, because it's like, we want to kind of push through as a society and as people, but it's really important to kind of give ourselves a little bit of space and time during this time, because it is difficult. That's what I'm taking away.
Yes, and most definitely. And that being said, I should add, to step in and out of our grief is very important. To not expect that maybe we'll feel sad all the time, right? We do want and need to have fun and to laugh and to not feel guilty, even after someone we love has died. And another piece too, it can be helpful to, put the heaviness aside for a bit, and that whether that's the heaviness and stress of our work or our grief or whatever we're carrying. And some helpful ways to do that, perhaps there's a tree in your yard and you decide, I just need to dump this by the tree for the night, and I'll pick it up in the morning. Or I'll put this in the mailbox and slam it shut. And if you don't have a mailbox, perhaps it's a cardboard box, right? To just leave that tough stuff, and allow yourself to also put it aside for a bit to keep well. That's another very helpful piece
Thank
in
you,
this journey.
Sonia. So we're really talking a lot about when, anyone out there has experienced varied, different losses, please be kind to yourself, acknowledge those emotions, embrace those feelings. And here's the thing, I have been seeing some really cool things this week on Facebook and Instagram and social media for, things like grade 8 graduation, and parents are dressing up their children, and they're taking pictures in the backyard. There are different ways that we can still think creatively and outside of the box to be able to celebrate some momentous occasions and not view it as a loss, and that to me makes me happy that there are different, ways that we can celebrate so much that's been canceled, postponed. So.
Yes, and I think in that vein, there's that gratitude for technology, right? And the connections and that we are able to make, not to minimize what people are experiencing, but thankful that we do have those ways to share those pictures and be so creative, or, get together for lunch, so to speak, online, to slow down in our life as well. That's something that I've heard over and over again. As much as this is so difficult, that the silver lining for many of us has been to, stop and be more observant, intentional. I always love taking pictures, but I've been finding that I'm taking, more nature scenes and really finding peace and comfort and enjoyment in that. So finding what's meaningful for yourself, maybe it's a hobby, or, something that you've wanted to pursue, books you've wanted to read for a long time, and you just haven't been able to get to that. Find the opportunities as well in the loss and in the struggle to make meaning out of it as much as possible for you.
Well, thank you so much. Ladies, it's been lovely again connecting with you all. And this will not be the last time I have Sonia on our Keep Connected podcast. So Sonia is the grief educator here at CMHA Windsor-Essex County branch. Sonia has a lot of upcoming webinars really focusing on parenting and Sonia, would you like to quickly run down if you know some of the dates or where they can find all of them?
Sure. Yeah, the ones that are coming up next are actually this coming week. Tuesday evening, May 26th, is the Bereavement Education Seminar. So that's grief in general, normalizing what we experience and what to expect. And then the Parenting Through Grief Seminar will be offered Thursday evening, May 28th, also at 7 o'clock. So
Wonderful.
feel welcome to register and tune into those. Be glad to have you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Ewelina
You're welcome.
and Sonia.
Thank you both.
You all have a fabulous week.
Yes,
Thank
you
you.
too. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Take care.